on this subject of food, I know we also talked a little bit on the phone about our dietary views, and particularly, I didn't bring this up, but it hit me after we got off the phone. So this autoimmune thing, what I find really interesting and what makes me want to tell you about a couple of books and stories that I've heard is one thing that has been just so the audience knows, what you would describe your diet as paleo with an inclusion of like limiting your meat, right? And then with an emphasis on the source of the meat and the quality, right?
Yes. So pretty paleo, and only limiting the meat if I don't trust or know where it comes from. As long as I trust my source, I'm good there. So I'm pretty much just meat, fish, fruit and veggies. More so, meat and veggies a lot of the time. So
okay.
Yeah.
So my diet is not radically different from yours.
That's what I thought.
It is. It's an emphasis on meat, certainly an emphasis on the quality and the source. There's a grass-fed farm that's like 2.5 hours outside of town, and the farmers come down for a Wilmington drop-off once a month, and it's right down the street. So I go like pick it up from them. It's good stuff, no antibiotics, no hormones, grass-fed animals, and I'm buying it directly from the people that farmed it.
Yeah. I'm going to have to go with you someday.
Yeah, absolutely. So the reason why I bring up the autoimmune thing is because I started reading about carnivore diets probably around 2018, and I got introduced to it through Jordan Peterson's daughter, Michaela Peterson. Have you heard of her or heard of Jordan Peterson?
It sounds so familiar.
I'll introduce you to some stuff when we're done, or maybe after this. But Michaela Peterson is Jordan's daughter, and she had like her whole life junior rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune thing, and she has a history of having all sorts of medical interventions across the board with all different doctors and surgeons and medical professionals. And she's had joints replaced. She's gone on all sorts of medications, and it's just to no avail, has not been able to stop this autoimmune condition. Yeah. And she started doing elimination diets. And I think she eventually got down to like meat and greens. And then I can't remember her reasoning why, but eventually she's like, I'm going to try to just cut out the greens, see what happens. And once she cut out the greens and it was just meat and salt, her autoimmune symptoms completely went away. Like after like her whole life of medical interventions. Yeah. And there are stories like that that are just expanding in the carnivore community of eliminating, because a lot of these plant foods, and this is the idea, like I told you, this arc of mine has gone from not giving a shit about diet at all to then having something that's more like to adopting some paleo principles. Like that makes sense. If it didn't exist 10,000 years ago, don't eat it. Don't eat any processed stuff. So fruit, vegetables, meat, nuts, seeds. And then I got into keto briefly, and I lost a good bit of weight and felt good, but then I found it to not very sustainable. Yeah. And then I finally, I was like, I've known about this carnivore thing. I'm going to read a book about it, just see what's there. Yeah. And once I did that, there's 2 books. One wasn't necessarily carnivore, but it was talking about the importance of meat. It was making it's divided into 3 parts. It's called The Sacred Cow. But the first part is the nutritional argument for meat and the quality of it. The second part is the environmental argument for meat. And then the third and it's about regenerative farming, and that actually like the gases that come from cows benefit the planet when done properly. And then the third is the ethical argument, because a lot of people have issues with the ethics of eating animals. Really great book. Now the second one was The Carnivore Code by Paul Saladino. And when he wrote this book, he was pure carnivore. He's now become animal-based, which is what I would identify my diet as the principles coming from. But in the book, he talks about, obviously, the importance of meat like the other one did, but And to dig into that a little bit, while there's immense nutrient profiles in both meat and vegetables, the thing about the meat is it's much more bioavailable because it's made from like flesh, and we're made from flesh. Where plants, it's less bioavailable. So let's just say there's 10 grams of iron in this bag of spinach, and there's 10 grams of iron in this little bit of steak here. Even in that, you're only going to absorb a small percent of what you eat from the spinach, which you probably had to eat a larger amount of anyway to get the 10 grams in volume. And then the meat, you absorb a lot more.
Yeah.
So that's one interesting element. But the other thing that the book introduced me to, which is why I ended up cutting out vegetables, and then the whole Michaela Peterson autoimmune thing makes a lot of sense, is this whole concept of the plant toxicity spectrum.
Don't get me started there.
So I'm sure you know a good bit about this.
The soils and everything.
Well, it's not even about mismanaged agriculture. Okay. It's also about, like, from an evolutionary perspective. So evolution wants things to be able to survive and pass along their genes and to continue existing throughout time and to reproduce. So animals, prey animals, they develop pragmatic ways to defend themselves from predators. So they can fight back, they can climb trees, they can camouflage, they can dig holes and all sorts of things. They have pragmatic ways of defending themselves. Now, plants are stuck in the ground, but they are also living, and they don't want to get eaten, and they don't want to die. So what do? They produce chemical compounds so that when something eats it, it either kills it, usually in the case of insects, or it makes it sick and damages it internally. And so a lot of vegetables, particularly the green ones, and like leaves, stems, roots, seeds, nuts, all these things are some of the most toxic plant foods. So while there are nutrients in plants, one, they're less bioavailable than the animal sources to us, but they also, in tandem with their nutritional elements, have elements that are damaging to the gut and cause inflammation. So a lot of people that are regularly consuming, particularly like the more toxic plants, because there's plants that are more toxic than others, and some that are maybe are questionable and not so much. I'm not I feel like things like roots and tubers, like potatoes and carrots, I think they're kind of low on there, but then things like leafy greens and nuts and seeds in particular are really highly defended.
That is so interesting to me, and I definitely want to read this book about that and dive into it a little bit more. I feel like a lot of people listening to this right now are going to be like, yes, no more vegetables. I don't have to eat my vegetables.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, there's definitely plenty of vegetable dishes that I like. Like when I go to a restaurant and they got like the crispy Brussels sprouts, I want that. But I mean, now that I have experienced time where I have completely eliminated vegetables, when I come back, that's when I notice, I have gas again. Like, 'cause you're not supposed to fart.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to have a constant stomach. And that's what I realized. She was like, I never realized how bad my digestion is until I like completely eliminated all these things that were causing chronic inflation in the gut and the organs. And
it makes so much sense.
Yeah. And I've been someone that has had stomach issues, I mean, for as long as I can remember. And it's only been in the past year of being fairly strict. Now, I was not very strict in the past few months and have gained some weight back from eating fucking crumble cookie and other bullshit.
Oh, God,
don't even get me started. That's my most recent sinister addiction. But
oh my God,
that'll be a whole 3-hour podcast.
Right? Invite me back on for that one.
Yeah, the dangers of crumble. We'll get into the deep files.
Right.
The corruption,
the cold cuts.
Yeah, the corruption of crumble. The crumbling of our nation. Anyway, the elimination of these toxic plant foods have been really great for stopping continued inflammation in the gut and allowing my gut to heal.
Yeah.
But then also what has really done, as I mentioned to you, this raw milk thing. It's also really good for the gut microbiome.
Raw milk.
Yeah.
The milk that you get from that farm.
Yeah, so unpasteurized milk, because all the milk that you can get in stores is pasteurized. It's heated, and it kills the digestive enzymes, and it kills a lot of the nutrients that are in milk, which is when it's raw, a super nutrient dense food, and humans have no problem digesting it if you don't kill the digestive enzymes.
Yeah.
Even there's a lot of people that think they're lactose intolerant and they can't handle dairy products because all they've ever had is pasteurized stuff.
Yeah.
And there is a legitimacy too. I know you've talked about the A1 casein protein. Yep. Mm-hmm. And so, like I said, this milk in particular, it's kind of hard to find, but they're from Jersey cows, and it's the A2 protein.
Yeah. And that's what I told you when we were on the phone the other day. I said, this is like, hearing you say Jersey cows is really ringing a bell, and it was in the book. So it's the Jersey cow milk, and the goat cheese and goat milk I'm able to have because it doesn't have that. So that was really interesting that you brought that up and reminded me of that.
Yeah. But where I was going with the raw milk is, have you ever heard of like kefir or kefir? Yeah. So I started making my own homemade kefir with the raw milk. I got like these grains and I drink it daily. And the half year plus that I've been doing that has been the most, because I've messed around with all sorts of probiotic, prebiotic enzyme supplements before in the past throughout various different iterations of my diet.
Yeah.
But now I don't do no supplementation. I have these little desiccated beef organ supplements I take, but I really don't use them very much. I like the brain one, but otherwise I try to eat actual organ meats.
Yeah. That's really cool.
But the kefir, the gut improvements from that have been immense. And that's why I've been cheating the past few months, is because I can now handle it without having horrible digestive issues for the first time ever. Like, I can actually cheat on the diet, and it might make me fat if I keep doing it, but in terms of like it ruining my day because my stomach just hurts, that doesn't happen anymore.
And when you say cheat, you're referring to
eating outside of the animal. So what I'm allowed to have is ruminant animal meat, so red meat from multi-gastric animals like cows, elk, deer, bison, whatever. So chicken and pork's not included. They're monogastric. I can have eggs if I'm eating them raw, just the yolks. Otherwise, I can cook them, and I care about the sources about all these things. And then bone broth, organ meats, emphasis on organ meats. And I like to eat the organ meats raw. I actually ate just all the meat raw for like 3 months straight. But
that's so interesting.
I know.
I like want to see you do this. I watched, did you ever used to watch Wife Swap on, I forget what it was, like what network it was on.
I've seen it before. I didn't like watch it though. Yeah.
Oh my God. I like binged it a little through the pandemic because they're just like time capsules. They're from the early 2000s. So it's so like early 2000s cringe. But one of like, they always match different families up, and they matched this like inner city, like very city life, clean family with this family that was living like rural on a farm, doing exactly what you're saying, like the raw meats, the kefir, like making all of their own stuff.
Oh, okay. I think I've seen clips of it on the internet.
Hilarious. And they're like, oh my God, this is child abuse. They make their kids eat raw meat. And they're like, no, this is the future.
Yeah. Well, the raw meat too, that it's the same kind of principles as the pasteurization of milk. When we cook the meat, it kills the digestive enzymes, and we could, like people will say they have digestive problems with eating meat. It's like, you might be overcooking it. But yeah, you can most of the time, especially if it's sourced from a good place, and you're not getting some like factory farm bullshit that has been mismanaged at your local grocery store. You can eat raw meat and not really be concerned about the bacteria. And a lot of being able to defend yourself from food poisoning does have to do with gut health. So you can eat something that would give an unhealthy person a terrible case of salmonella, where if you have a healthy gut, the gut microbiome just eats that shit up and you don't get sick.
That good old microbiome.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned elk. I had elk last night.
Oh, you did you? I love elk.
It was so good. Oh my God, it was good.
But an important distinction that I failed to mention earlier. So the difference between carnivore and animal-based is this. Carnivore is typically zero carb, and it's a complete emphasis on the ruminant animal meat. And usually if you're doing seasoning, it's just salt. Some people, kind of veer off like, oh, no, seasoning's fine. But a lot of them are like seed and leaf based. So you don't want to add that in there. Kind of defeats the whole purpose of
Yeah.
the gut inflammation thing.
Yeah.
But animal-based is the inclusion of the least toxic plant foods, aka fruits, because fruits evolutionarily are the parts of the plant that it's not their body, it's this thing that they bear to fall off, and it looks ripe and delicious, and it's sweet, so that it gets the animals to eat it and swallow the seeds whole and shit them out and plant a new tree. So fruits have the least toxic. A lot of them don't have, I mean, if they do have toxic compounds, it's like just in the skin, you peel the skin off and that kind of thing, or you just get rid of the seeds and that kind of thing. But that has been, that introduction of carbohydrates in the fruit form has been what has led my dietary arc to like, this is sustainable now.
Yeah.
The version of the carnivore diet where it didn't include fruit and honey, I couldn't really do that for very long, because I think there's just that ketosis exhaustion past like the 3+ month mark that most people have experiences with.